Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today I'm going to be showing you ILNP's new Love Story collection for Valentine's Day. Super excited to be showing you the first collection release of 2025, at least on my channel. This little trio features 3 new romantic shades in their studio color line, which is basically their cream finishes or just their non-specialty finish line of polishes. So as always, I will save more of my thoughts for the end after comparisons. For now, let me just show you the swatches. The first shade we have is Soulmate, and this one is described as a dreamy ivory rose. So at first glance, it definitely looks like a plain ivory, a creamy off-white sort of color, but there is the slightest hint of pink in here. You'll be able to see it better in comparisons later, but the formula on this one was super impressive. It had just flawless coverage and application. It was incredibly smooth to apply. It didn't feel too thick or too thin. I also thought that it self-leveled really beautifully, where it was just so even on the 2 coats, which I was kind of impressed since it is such a light color. So it was just super creamy with the perfect amount of pigmentation to it. So here it is as a full hand manicure in 2 coats in natural lighting. I think this is such a refreshing kind of color, especially for this time of year. I would say it definitely leans more of an ivory color. The pink really is just a whisper. The next shade we have is Love Letter, and this is an enchanting mauve berry. So this one didn't have a creamy formula like the last one. I want to say this is a little bit more on the fluid, almost crelly side, but I found that the formula was just so perfect. I mean, as you can see, the first coat alone is just so flawless. I feel like it's very even coverage, just a little bit sheer, where if you're looking close enough, you can still see a hint of nail line, but it built up perfectly opaque in just 2 coats. But I just could not get over how smooth this felt to apply, and I feel like that's saying something because I normally don't love these more crelly leaning creams, so take that as you will. But while the formula was absolutely perfect, I didn't end up loving this one on me. There's just something about the color that I don't know if it just doesn't suit me or if I just personally don't like it, but it sadly was my least favorite of the trio. And the last polish in the collection is Adored, which is a romantic red berry. So I found that this one had another crelly leaning kind of formula, as you can probably tell on the first coat here. But unfortunately, I didn't find it as even as Love Letter for whatever reason. I feel like you can tell there are some light spots here and there on my nail, but because it's such a dark shade, I did find that this one was perfectly opaque in 2 coats. It really evened out. It self-leveled beautifully. So, you know, I can't really complain too much about it. No surprise, I love the color. I'm such a fan of these berry red kind of shades, especially for this time of year. So I kind of figured that this was going to be my favorite from the trio because, again, I just love this sort of color and I think it looks so nice on me. But I don't know, I feel like after trying Soulmate, there was just something so satisfying about the really creamy kind of formula that I just prefer over the more fluid or crelly kind of formula as seen in this shade or the previous one. So it's hard to choose just one favorite between the 2. And here's a little collage of my full hand swatches of the Love Story trio. I just love this more elegant kind of romantic color palette. I think the colors are just so beautiful. Definitely very classic, sophisticated kind of shades that are so demure. I know they're not going to be for everybody, but I can respect them. So getting into comparisons, we're starting with Soulmate, and I wanted to quickly show this next to Canvas, which is ILNP's pure white cream, just for reference. You can really tell how ivory Soulmate is, but because it's described as an ivory rose, I did also want to quickly show this next to Twirl, which was the baby pink from last year's Valentine's Day collection, but that one is much more pink. So I thought some closer shades were Holo Taco's Sweet Tooth, which was their pastel pink from last year's spring bundle, Candle. That one still looks a little bit more pink than Soulmate, but it is much lighter than Twirl. And lastly, here is Holo Ivory Tower, which is their true ivory cream from the Dark Academia collection. Obviously a lot brighter, a little bit more of a yellow kind of undertone. So seeing them all swatched here, I'm wearing them in 2 coats each, and I would say Soulmate definitely looks very close to Sweet Tooth, but it's still a little bit lighter and less pink. I do have 2 more comparisons for this shade because I figured that this would maybe be a closer dupe to a mainstream brand. So here it is next to OPI's Be There in a Prosecco and Essie's Urban Jungle, both of which are like 2 of my favorite sort of neutral ivory shades. Between these 2, I would say that OPI is a little bit more ivory leaning with the yellow undertone. Essie looks closer, maybe just a bit more muted. Then for Love Letter, I wanted to quickly show this next to Holding Hands, which was a previous Valentine's Day polish from ILNP, but as you can see, that one is much lighter and obviously has a different finish, so definitely not a dupe. I thought maybe it would be closer to Mooncat's Freudian Slip, which is one of their creams, but that one is more on the purple side, so definitely not as berry leaning or pink leaning as ILNP. Again, I thought that this would be a little bit easier to dupe with like a mainstream kind of polish, but I really didn't have anything similar in my collection. The closest that I had from OPI was Claydreaming, and the only other relatively close shade was this color department called Wine Sips, but that one and OPI are just much deeper, a lot more muted. Love Letter is definitely the most saturated of the 3, and I guess this answers my question that I just don't really like this color because I just don't have it. Lastly, for Adore, I wanted to quickly show this next to Cherry, which is a true cherry red cream, just for color reference so you can see how berry leaning it is. I feel like maybe the closest color wise that ILNP has is Be Mine, but that's a magnetic and it's a little bit more of a raspberry red. So again, I really thought that I would have something closer from a mainstream brand, so here it is next to Zoya's Rochelle, which is obviously a little bit more red, a little bit brighter, but then I remembered I had OPI's We the Female, which I thought looked really similar. Like maybe it was a little bit more red or pink leaning, but it was definitely more similar than Rochelle was. But swatching them on the nail, OPI is actually a little bit darker, so I still wouldn't call these dupes. And lastly, I remember that I had 2 other shades that might be even more similar. This first one is Holo I'm Over Brew, and this last shade is Olive Ave's Venetian from one of their fall collections. These are all just those berry reddish purple kind of shades, so I was sure that one of these would be a dupe, but sadly they are not. If anything, Venetian and I'm Over Brew are a little bit more similar to each other because they're both more muted, but I think Venetian is the closest to Adored because it's more red leaning, while Holo is more of a berry purple. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons for ILNP's Love Story collection. As always, I can't wait to hear what you think of this release because I really like it. As a hopeless romantic Libra, I just naturally love any kind of Valentine's Day release, and I feel like ILNP has given us a couple of them over the recent years, and I really love that this trio is a lot more sophisticated in its color palette, almost like more mature, especially compared to their trio last year, which had this more like playful, flirty kind of vibe to it. I just really love how, you know, they're 2 totally different vibes. Because of that, I can see a few more people not loving these, maybe because they are like a little more mature, where admittedly they kind of remind me of colors that like my mom would wear, and you know, just not anything else other than that. But I still do like the shades. Like I still love berry reds and soft ivories. I do wish that I loved the mauve shade more, but it's just not for me. I feel like I'm really picky with mauves in general, but even in general, I feel like this color palette isn't super exciting for me either. Like it's romantic, but at the same time, it definitely just gives me like mainstream vibes with these colors specifically. So while I didn't have exact dupes for mainstream polishes in my collection, I wouldn't be surprised if there is an exact dupe out there for each of these shades. I feel like I just personally don't have a lot of mainstream polishes compared to like indie indies or boutique brands. So once I did the comparisons for them, I realized that I kind of liked some of the other shades I already had a little bit more than these, but you know, that's just personal preference. Like obviously as polishes, these are still incredible. Like I was so impressed with the formulas. It's still hard to choose my favorite between Soulmate and Adored, but either way, I would love to know what you think of these. And if you are interested in getting them, they are going to be launching on Friday, January 10th, where they'll be available for about a week at a pre-order discount before going full price. So let me know what you think of these, if you're going to be picking them up or if you'll be skipping them because you probably have dupes in your collection. I'd love to know so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.